Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something pretty serious. We're going to be talking about involuntary servitude.
Oh, wow.
In the modern world.
Okay.
Now you might be thinking like chains, right? Forced labor.
Right.
But what if I told you that those chains could be digital?
Mm.
We're going to be exploring how legal systems and even like technology can intersect and create a very modern, like a modern form of captivity.
It's a disturbing reality that we see sometimes. It's often hidden, right in front of us.
Exactly. And our guide for this deep dive is an excerpt from Disquiet Force into Identity and Involuntary Servitude, a legal and societal examination.
Okay.
By Sarai Hannah Ajai.
Interesting.
Now,
and Ajai presents a case study.
Yes.
That, unsettling. It really provides a crucial look into how these systems are manipulated.
And this case is about an unnamed victim. She's a law-abiding U.S. citizen, but her identity has been stolen and is being exploited. And it's kind of a stark example of how someone can become trapped by the very institutions that are supposed to protect them.
Right.
Where do we even begin to, untie this knot?
Well, I think it's important to first understand that we're not talking about forced labor in the traditional sense when we think about that.
Yeah.
This case really goes beyond that. It's about coercion, identity theft, and a systemic marginalization that really strips away someone's freedom. And self-determination.
So are we talking about a shift from physical chains to digital and legal ones?
Yeah, precisely. And if you look back at the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, there's this clause that says, it allows involuntary servitude as punishment for a crime.
Right.
But this exception, which was intended, for the justice system, it becomes this really dangerous loophole when it's manipulated outside of its intended context.
Wow. Now, I understand the parallels to historical slavery, but is there a risk of kind of trivializing the experiences of those who suffered under that,
That's a valid concern, for sure.
Brutal system.
It's not about equating the two.
Okay.
But it's more about understanding how power dynamics and exploitation can, manifest in different ways throughout history.
Right.
And adapt to these new situations.
Okay.
And in this case, we're seeing the victim's identity is being totally falsified.
Right.
Her sex, her gender, her race are essentially being erased to gain control over her.
Oh, wow.
And this echoes a historical pattern of dehumanization that's been used, to justify oppression.
So it's about more than just stealing someone's personal information.
Right.
It's stealing their autonomy. It's stealing their sense of self.
Yeah, and the legal system, particularly in areas like landlord-tenant disputes, can unfortunately be manipulated to facilitate this type of exploitation.
Yeah.
The source actually mentions a forged driver's license.
Wow.
As an example. And this is not just, identity theft.
Right.
This is a tool to control her finances, to get into her accounts, to erase her from official records.
I'm grappling with how technology can be both a tool for empowerment, but also for oppression. How do we navigate that duality?
Yeah, it's a really important question for all of us. I think this case really highlights the urgent need for legal systems to catch up to these modern forms of exploitation.
Yeah.
This forged driver's license is an example of how the victim is being denied due process.
Right.
Which is the right to a fair hearing and a chance to defend yourself.
Okay.
And this it's enshrined in the Fifth Amendment and is being systematically violated.
Now, for our listener, due process is a fundamental legal concept that basically ensures fairness and protects people from arbitrary actions by the state.
Right.
Can you, explain how this denial of due process is playing out in this victim's case?
Sure. The perpetrator is using legal maneuvering to prevent the victim from, presenting evidence or even having a fair hearing.
Okay.
They're exploiting legal processes that are really meant for, legitimate disputes to just silence and control her.
So the very system that is designed to uphold justice is being twisted to perpetuate injustice.
Unfortunately, yeah, that's what we're seeing here.
Wow.
And this brings us to this chilling concept of economic slavery in the digital age.
That sounds like Something out of like a dystopian novel.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's about controlling someone's finances, their data, their online presence for profit. Essentially, they're treating this victim as a commodity,
Right.
exploiting her for their own like economic gain.
So this raises an important question for you to consider. How can someone be economically enslaved in the digital age? Like, what does that look like?
Mm.
Yeah.
Imagine, someone controls your bank accounts, your credit cards, your ability to like earn a living online.
Right.
They can manipulate your digital footprint, maybe to damage your reputation, limit your opportunities, and essentially like hold you hostage.
Wow.
In a system that was, made for commerce and connection.
It's like a perversion of the digital marketplace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just like historical slavery, which was fundamentally about economic exploitation, this case demonstrates that same motive, but in a modern context. Using the tools of the digital age.
So how does stealing an identity translate to this kind of like economic control? What are the like potential motives at play here?
Well, the possibilities are kind of, chillingly vast.
Yeah.
The perpetrators could be using her stolen identity for, straight up financial gain, like siphoning off funds, opening fraudulent accounts.
Yeah.
Or even like assuming her identity to access, benefits or services.
Wow.
They could be exploiting her data for profit, selling it maybe on the dark web or using it for targeted advertising.
Oh, wow.
Or they could even be using her digital presence to spread misinformation, or manipulate online systems for their own benefit.
That's terrifying. It really highlights the vulnerability of our digital identities.
It is.
In this like interconnected world.
Yeah, I think it's a wake-up call for all of us.
Right.
The more we rely on these digital systems, the more important it is to understand the risks and to, take steps to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Now, let's dive into a particularly disturbing aspect of this case, which is the psychological impact of this exploitation. You mentioned earlier that the victim is experiencing like constant harassment and a sense of being like watched.
Right.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. The source material describes how the perpetrators are actually using her devices.
Oh, wow.
Against her. They're manipulating her technology to track her movements.
Right.
To get her information.
Okay.
To essentially like control her digital life.
Right.
They're invading her privacy on a level that most people can't even imagine.
It's like they've turned her own technology into a weapon against her.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of psychological toll does that take?
Imagine this constant fear of being watched. The anxiety of knowing your every move is being tracked, the feeling of being trapped in your own home, in your own like digital space.
It's a violation on such a profound level.
It is.
It strips away any sense of like safety and security.
Exactly. And this constant surveillance creates this atmosphere of fear, paranoia.
Right.
Making her feel like she can never really escape their control.
Wow.
This is a form of psychological torture.
The source material also draws parallels to the psychological trauma experienced by slaves throughout history. Yeah. Can you kind of unpack that for our listener?
Sure. If you think about the psychological effects of being enslaved, like the powerlessness, the loss of control over your own life, the fear, the dehumanization, those same psychological wounds, they're present in this case, even though the chains, are digital rather than physical.
So even though the forms of exploitation have like evolved, the fundamental psychological impact is the same.
Yeah, I think that's a really key insight. And what's even more disturbing is that technology in this case is actually amplifying those harms.
Right.
The surveillance, the manipulation, the fear it creates.
Yeah.
This truly terrifying experience.
It's a stark reminder that, trauma doesn't always leave visible scars.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And the wounds of exploitation, they can be really deep, even without physical violence. I think this case forces us to ask some uncomfortable questions about how we're using technology and the potential consequences of it.
This is all incredibly unsettling, but I really appreciate you helping us kind of unpack these complex issues.
Yeah.
What can we as individuals do to protect ourselves from this type of digital age exploitation?
Well, I think awareness is really the first line of defense. People need to understand the risks that are associated with digital identity theft and how to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And that means being careful about what information you share online, using strong passwords, being wary of, phishing scams, and regularly checking your accounts for any suspicious activity.
So it's about taking proactive steps to safeguard our digital identity.
Exactly. It's about being vigilant and informed in a world where, our data is so valuable and unfortunately so vulnerable.
What about the bigger picture? What kind of systemic changes are needed to address this problem on a broader scale?
We need stronger privacy laws and regulations to protect our digital information. Our current laws really just haven't kept pace with how fast technology is advancing.
Yeah.
And that leaves us all exposed, unfortunately.
But that's a critical point.
Yeah.
Our laws really need to catch up to the realities of the digital age.
They do. And we need to hold these tech companies accountable for creating these platforms and devices that are, vulnerable to exploitation.
Right.
They have a responsibility to put user privacy and security first, not just profits.
That sounds like a monumental task, but it's one we can't ignore.
You're right. The stakes are just too high. If we don't act, we risk creating a future where, individual autonomy is just a memory and exploitation is, the norm.
That's a chilling thought. It really underscores the urgency of this issue. What steps can we take as individuals?
Well, there's a lot you can do.
Okay.
You can support these organizations that are fighting for digital rights and privacy. You can contact your elected officials and demand stronger protections.
Right.
And most importantly, have these conversations with your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Spread awareness.
Yeah. Raise your voice. Demand change.
And demand change.
Remember, this isn't just about protecting ourselves. It's about creating a future where everyone can live with dignity and autonomy in this digital world.
Well said. This has been a truly eye-opening conversation. Yeah. And while it's unsettling to confront these dark realities, it's so crucial that we don't shy away from them.
Yeah.
So for our listener, stay tuned. We're going to continue this deep dive and explore potential solutions for combating this digital age involuntary servitude.
Yeah, we'll dive into that.
Absolutely. We've been talking about this case of modern day involuntary servitude, and it's clear that the digital age has really brought a whole new dimension to this issue.
It has.
Before we jump into solutions, I want to go back to something that you touched on earlier, which is the psychological impact on the victim. What specific details from the source material really stuck out to you?
Well, the way the perpetrators are, using technology to manipulate and control the victim is really disturbing.
Right.
I mean, they're essentially waging this psychological war against her, using her devices to just create this environment of constant fear and uncertainty.
It's like they've weaponized technology to break her spirit.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it's really important to understand that, this kind of psychological manipulation can be just as damaging as physical abuse.
Right.
If not more so.
You mentioned that they're manipulating her devices. Right. Can you give our listener a concrete example of what that might look like?
Sure. The source describes how they might be using spyware to track her every move.
Okay.
Reading her emails, her texts, listening to her calls, maybe even activating her camera and microphone without her knowledge.
Right.
So they're basically turning her own technology against her, making her feel like she has no privacy, no safe space.
That's a chilling thought, the idea that your phone, your computer could be used to spy on you. It's like a violation of privacy on a level that most people just wouldn't even consider.
And the really insidious thing about this type of abuse is that it doesn't leave any any physical scars.
Right. Yeah.
It's all happening in this digital world.
Right.
Which can make it even harder for victims to prove what's happening to them, or even articulate what they're going through.
It's almost like a form of gaslighting, making the victim question her own sanity, her own perception of reality.
Yeah, and it highlights the insidious nature of it.
Right.
Perpetrators they're trying to erase the victim's sense of self, her ability to trust her own instincts.
The source material draws some interesting parallels between the psychological impact of this digital exploitation and the trauma experienced by, those who were enslaved throughout history.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on those parallels a little bit?
Of course. So if you think about, like, the psychological effects of being enslaved, that feeling of powerlessness, the loss of control over your life, the constant fear, the dehumanization, those same psychological wounds are present in this case, even though, like I said, the chains are digital rather than physical.
So it seems like the digital age hasn't really, like, eradicated these age-old forms of exploitation.
Right.
It's just found new ways to, like, manifest them.
And in some ways, technology has actually amplified these harms. I mean, this constant surveillance, the ability to control someone's digital life, the online harassment, all of these things contribute to, like, this level of psychological trauma that can be so hard to overcome.
So what we're seeing here is a new form of, like, power imbalance facilitated by technology.
Exactly, and it's an imbalance that we need to address quickly. If we don't take steps to mitigate these harms, we're going to be creating a digital world where exploitation and abuse are just rampant.
This all feels very, very overwhelming. What can we do as individuals, like, to push back against this tide of digital exploitation?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one we all need to be asking ourselves.
Like where do we even begin?
Well, I think the first step is awareness.
Oh,
the more we know about the risks of, digital exploitation, the better we'll be able to protect ourselves and those around us.
Okay.
We need to, really educate ourselves about how our data can be, used and misused.
Right.
The techniques that these perpetrators are using.
Right.
And the steps we can take to safeguard our digital lives.
So knowledge is power in this context.
Absolutely. But awareness alone, it's not enough.
Right.
We have to be proactive in protecting ourselves.
So that means, like, strong passwords, being wary of phishing scams, limiting what we share online, monitoring our accounts for suspicious activity.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's about, adopting a more mindful, intentional approach to our digital lives.
Exactly. We really need to be more deliberate about how we're engaging with technology and recognizing, the benefits and the harms.
Now, this isn't just about, like, protecting ourselves, though, right?
Right.
We also have a responsibility to, like, look out for others, especially those who might be more vulnerable to this type of exploitation.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We need to create this culture of support and awareness where we're all, looking out for each other and speaking up when something seems wrong. We have to be willing to challenge things and demand better protections for everyone, not just ourselves.
This brings us to the issue of, like, systemic change.
Yeah.
What can we do, like, collectively to address the root causes of this problem?
That's a complex question, and there's no, like, simple answer.
Right.
But I think there are a few key areas that we really need to focus on.
What are those areas?
Well, first, we need stronger privacy laws and regulations.
Okay.
Our current laws they're just not keeping up with how quickly technology is changing.
Yeah.
And it leaves us all vulnerable.
Right.
We need to be, really pushing for legislation that gives people more control over their data.
Okay.
And holds companies accountable for protecting it.
That makes sense. It's about shifting the balance of power, back in favor of the individual.
Exactly. We also need to be holding these tech companies accountable for how they design their platforms and devices.
Yeah.
They need to be prioritizing privacy and security from the start.
It sounds like we need to demand, like, more ethical, more responsible practices from the tech industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that means being willing to vote with our wallets.
Okay.
Supporting those companies that align with our values and boycotting the ones that don't.
So it's about using our consumer power to drive change.
Right. And finally, we really need to invest in education and awareness campaigns to help people understand the risks of digital exploitation and how to protect themselves.
Okay.
This is definitely a long-term solution.
Right.
But it's so essential if we want to create, like, a more resilient and informed digital society.
So it sounds like we need a multi-pronged approach here, tackling this problem from multiple angles.
That's right. This isn't a problem that any one person or any one organization can solve.
Right.
It's going to require all of us, individuals, lawmakers, tech companies, educators, all working together to create a digital world that is safe and equitable and just for everyone.
This conversation has really highlighted the importance of taking action.
It has.
But I have to admit, it's also left me feeling a little overwhelmed.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to our listener who might be, feeling the same way?
It's completely natural to feel overwhelmed when you think about the scale and the complexity of this.
Yeah.
But it's so important to remember that even small actions can make a difference.
Okay.
Don't underestimate the power of your voice, your choices, and your willingness to stand up for what's right.
So you're saying that we shouldn't let the enormity of the problem,
Right.
paralyze us into inaction.
Exactly. Every step we take, no matter how small, it's a step in the right direction.
That's an encouraging thought. This case, while deeply disturbing, can serve as a catalyst for positive change.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a reminder that we can't be complacent when it comes to protecting our digital rights and freedoms.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
This is a wake-up call. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of the digital world.
It's a call to action for all of us.
It is.
So for a listener, as we move into the final part of this deep dive, we're going to be exploring some specific actions you can take to protect yourself and advocate for a more just, an equitable digital world.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We've spent this deep dive exploring this really unsettling case of modern day involuntary servitude and how legal systems and technology can be manipulated for exploitation. It's really heavy stuff.
It is.
But I believe that there's always room for hope.
Yeah.
What gives you optimism when you're facing a problem like this?
Well, I think, what gives me hope is just the power of awareness. The fact that we're even having this conversation, that people are starting to recognize the very real dangers of digital exploitation.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge step forward.
So shining a light on these dark corners is the first step towards change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the more people that understand this issue, the more we can really build momentum for real solutions.
Now, you mentioned that technology, while being used as a tool for oppression in this case, can also be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? What does that look like a tech-driven solution?
Well, there's a lot of potential for technology to actually empower people and protect them from exploitation.
Okay.
For instance, I think we could see more sophisticated, privacy-enhancing technologies developed that could give people greater control over their data.
So giving people the tools to safeguard their own digital lives.
Exactly. Think about decentralized identity systems where individuals actually hold and manage their own identities rather than relying on these third-party institutions.
Okay.
Or imagine tools that allow people to actually track how their data is being used, how it's being sold.
Wow.
And give them the power to opt out or even demand compensation.
That sounds like a pretty radical shift.
It is.
In how we think about,
It is.
data ownership and control.
Yeah, and I think it's a shift that's been a long time coming.
Okay.
We need to move away from this model where our data is treated as just a commodity.
Right.
To be bought and sold without our consent.
What role do you see policymakers playing in creating a safer and a more equitable digital landscape?
The policymakers have a really crucial role to play in shaping the legal framework that governs the digital world.
Okay.
We need stronger privacy laws that give individuals more control over their data and hold those companies accountable for protecting it.
So it's about creating a legal environment that prioritizes individual rights in the digital age?
Exactly. We also need to invest in digital literacy programs.
Okay.
To empower people to navigate the digital world safely and responsibly. We can't expect people to protect themselves if they don't understand the risks or how to mitigate them.
That really aligns with what you were saying earlier about collective action.
It does.
It's not just about, individuals taking responsibility, but it's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up and advocate for change.
Absolutely. This isn't just a tech problem. It's a societal problem.
Yeah.
And it needs a societal solution.
Right.
We all need to to challenge the way things are, we need to demand better from our lawmakers, from the tech industry, and work together to create a digital world that's safe and equitable and just for everybody.
This deep dive has taken us on a tough journey.
Yes.
But it's clear that you are very passionate about creating a better future for everyone in the digital world.
I am.
And I think our listeners feeling inspired right now and wants to take action.
That's great.
What would you say to someone listening and thinking, okay, I'm ready. Where do I start?
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
There are so many ways to get involved.
Okay.
I would say, start by educating yourself. There's tons of resources available online and in your community that can teach you about digital rights, online privacy, and how to protect yourself from exploitation.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And once you have that knowledge, share it with others.
Okay.
Talk to your friends. Talk to your family about these issues.
Right.
Raise awareness on social media. Contact your elected officials. Demand stronger protections for digital rights.
So it's about taking that knowledge and transforming it into action.
Yeah, support organizations that are fighting for digital rights, for a more equitable digital world.
Okay.
Volunteer your time, donate to their cause.
Yeah.
Every little bit helps.
You can all be part of the solution.
Exactly.
Even in those small ways.
Right. And remember, don't underestimate the power of your voice. Speak up. Challenge the way things are, demand better. Together, we can create a digital world that's truly worthy of our humanity.
That's a very powerful vision.
Thank you.
And it's one I think we can all aspire to. This deep dive has been a sobering reminder of the challenges that we face in the digital age. But it's also given us hope for a brighter future.
It has.
And remember, change starts with each of us.
It does.
So to our listener, we leave you with this final question. What will you do today to create a safer, a more just, and a more equitable digital world?
The future is in our hands. Let's make it a future we can all be proud of.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you for having me.
We hope you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking. And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep fighting the good fight.